sing his favourite song, which is a different kettle of fish. Okay. So he's telling us about this. When I am laid, I'm laid in earth. May my wrongs create no trouble in thy breast. Remember me, but forget my fate. It's a beautiful night and no mistake. You would never think there was a war somewhere. These less than prophetic words were spoken by a young Navy second lieutenant on the wide, night-bedarkened deck of our supply ship bound for Accra. He was a tubby little man whom the day's sun had scorched red. Happy to hear an Irish accent, I asked him where he was from, and he said, with that special enthusiasm Irish people reserve for each other when they accidentally meet abroad, Donegal. We talked then about Bundoran in the summer, where my father had often brought his band. It was a pleasure to shoot the breeze with him for a few moments as the engines growled on deep below. The cargo was 800 men and officers, all headed for various parts of British Africa. There was the noise of the little parliaments of the card players and the impromptu music halls of the whiskey drinkers, and true enough, a lovely mole-grey air moved across the ship in a beneficent wave. We could see the coast of Africa lying out along a minutely fidgeting shoreline. The only illuminations were the merry lights of the ship and the sombre philosophical lights of God above. Otherwise the land ahead was favoured only by darkness, a confident brushstroke of rich black ink. I had been in an excellent mood for days, having picked the winner of the Middle Park Stakes at Nottingham. Every so often I stuck a hand in my right pocket and jingled part of my winnings in the shape of a few half-crowns. The rest of it was inserted into an inside pocket of my uniform, a fold of lovely, crisp white banknotes. I got up to Nottingham on a brief furlough, having been given a length of time not quite long enough to justify the long trek across England and Ireland to Sligo. France had fallen to Hitler, and suddenly, bizarrely, colonies like the Gold Coast were surrounded by the new enemy, the forces of the Vichy French. Oh, no one knew what was going to happen, but we were being shunted down quickly to be in place, to blow bridges, burst canals and break up roads if the need arose. We had heard the colonial regiments were being swelled by new recruits, thousands of Gold Coast men rushing to defend the empire. I suppose this was when Tom Quay, though of course I didn't know him then, joined up. So, I was standing there, flush with my winnings, not thinking of much, as always somewhat intoxicated by being at sea, somewhat in love with an unknown coastline and the intriguing country lying in behind. I had also about a bottle of Scotch whisky in me, though I stood rooted as a tree for all that. It was a moment of simple exhilaration. My red hair, the self-same red hair that had first brought me to the attention of May, for it was not I who said hello to her first, but she, with her playful question in the simple, neat quadrangle of the university, "I suppose you put a collar in that?" My red hair was brushed flat back from my forehead, my second lieutenant's cap holding it down like a pot lid. My cheeks had been shaved by my Batman, Percy Welsh. My underclothes were starched, my trousers were creased, my shoes were signalling back brightly to the moon, when suddenly the whole port side of the ship seemed to go up. Right in front of my eyes, an enormous gush and geyser of water, a shuddering explosion, an ear-numbing rip of metallic noise, and a vast red corner to flames, the size of the torch on the Statue of Liberty. The young second lieutenant from Donegal was suddenly as dead as one of those porpoises you will see washed up on the beach at Enniscrone after a storm, on the deck beside me, felled by a jagged missile of stray metal. Men came tearing up from below, the doorways oozing them out as if so much boiling molasses. There were cries and questions, even as the gigantic fountain of displaced water collapsed and found the deck and hammered us flat there as if we were blobs of dough. Two of my sappers were trying to peel me back up from the deck, itself splintered and cratered from the force, and now other stray bits of the ship rained down, clattering and banging and bursting and killing. That was a fucking torpedo, said my sergeant, with perfect redundancy. A little man called Ned Johns from Cornwall, the most knowledgeable man for a fuse I ever worked with. He probably knew the make and poundage of the torpedo, but if he did, he didn't say. The next second, the huge ship started to pitch to port, and before I could grab him, Ned Johns went off sliding down the new slope and smashing into the rail, gathered himself, stood up, looked back at me, and then was wrenched across the rail and out of view. I knew we were hole deep under the waterline. I could more or less feel it in my body. Something vital torn out of the ship echoed in the pit of my stomach. Some mischief done, deep, deep in some engine room or cargo hold. My other helper, Johnny Fox Talbot, a man so lean you could have used him for spare wire, as poor Ned Johns once said, in truth was using me now as a kind of bollard, but so I was no good, because the ship seemed to make a delayed reaction to its wound and shuddered upward, the ship's rail rearing up 10 feet in a bizarre and impossible movement, catching poor Johnny completely off guard, since he'd been bracing himself against a force from the other direction, and off he went behind me, pulling the trouser leg off my uniform as he did so, sending my precious half-crowns firing in every direction. Well, so for a moment of odd calm I stood there, one leg bare to the world, my cap still in place inexplicably, myself drenched so thoroughly I felt 100% seawater. An iron ladder full of men from God knows where, maybe even from inside the ship, or from the side of the command deck more likely, with about a dozen calling and screaming persons clinging to it like forest monkeys. Moved past me as if it were a trolley being wheeled by the demon of this attack, and crossed the ravaged deck, and pitched down into the moiling dark sea behind. Everything roared for that moment, the high night sky of blanketing stars, the great and immaculate silver serving dish of the sea itself, the rended ship, the offended and ruined men. And then, precipitatively, a silence reigned, the shortest reign of any silence in the empires of silence. The whole vista, the far-off coast, the deck, the sea, was as still for a moment as a painting, as if someone had just painted it all in his studio and was gazing at it, contemplating it, reaching out to put a finishing touch on it, of smoke, of fire, of blood, of water. And then I felt the whole ship leave me, sink under my boots so suddenly that there was for that second a gap between me and it, so that wasn't I like an angel, a winged man suspended? Then gravity broke the spell. Gravity ruined the bloody illusion. And I went miserably and roaringly downward with the ship. The deck broke into the waters. It smashed through the sacred waters like a child breaks an ice puddle in a Sligo winter. It made a noise like that of something solid, something icy breaking. Glass really, but not glass, infinitely soft and receiving water. The deeps, the dreaded deeps. The reason why fishermen never learn to swim. Let the waters take us quickly. Let there be no thrashing and hoping and swimming. No, let your limbs go, be calm. Put your trust in God. Pray quick to your Redeemer. And I did, just like an Aaron fisherman, and give up my soul to God, and sent my last signal of love flying back across Europe to May. May and my children, up the night-filthy coast of Africa, across the Canaries, across the old boot of England, and the ancient baby shape of Ireland. I sent her my last word of love. I love thee, May. I am sorry. The ocean closed over my head with its iron will, and the fantastical suck of the sinking ship drew me down as if 100 demons were yanking on my legs. Down, down we went, our handsome troop ship made in Belfast. The loose bodies of the already drowned, the myriad papers and plans for war, the tins of sardines we'd taken in Algiers, the fabulous materiel, the brand new trucks, the stocks of tires, the 53 horses, the wooden stakes, the planks, the box of carefully stored explosives. All down to Neptune we went, extinguished in a moment without either glory or cowardice, an action of the gods, of queer physics, that huge metal mass, sucker punched, beaten, ruined, wrecked, fucked all hell, as Ned Johns would say. And I felt the water all around as if I were in the body of a physical creature, as if this were its blood, and the scientifically explainable forces at work were its sinews and muscles, and it stopped my mouth and found the secret worm whirls of my ears, and it wanted entry into me, but I had grabbed, stolen, fetched out with an instinctive exuberance, a last great gulp of breath, and I was bearing this down with me, in my chest, around my heart, as my singing response. My ears were now thundering with the thunders of the sea. I thought I could hear the ship itself cry out in a crazy vocabulary of pain, as if a man could learn this lingo somewhere, the tearing death cries of a vessel, all the while as if standing on the deck, but that was not possible. And then I thought the ship was turning sideways, like a giant in its bed, and I had no choice but to go with it. I was like a salmon looking for the seam in a waterfall, where it could grip its way to the gravel beds on grips of mere water. And now I thought I was rushing over the side, away from the deck, accelerated by some unknown force, faster than the ship itself, and I was scraping along metal. I felt long seal grass and barnacles. Surely I could not have, but I thought I did. And just as the ship went right over, or so I imagined it, how could I know? In the deepest dark, in the darkest, deepest dark that ever was, an instance of utter blackness, suddenly I felt the very keel of the troop ship, something wide and round and good, the sacred keel, the foundation of the sailor's hope, the guarantor of his sleep between watches, but all up the wrong way, in the wrong place, violently torn from its proper place. And just in that moment, with a great groan, a weird and menacing sign, a sort of silence is the worst noise in creation, the keel halted and went back the other way, like the spine of a whale, as if the ship were now fishing. Because I was holding onto the keel, riding it like a fly on a saddle, it sort of threw me back the other way, catapulted me slowly. Mr. Cannonball himself, in the twopenny circus of old at Enniscrow. My childhood flaring in my head, my whole life flaring, and then I seemed to be in the shrouds of the little forward mast, and I squeezed my body into a tight ball again, pure instinct, not a thought in my head. And as the kill ship rolled slowly over, seeking its doom, at least in a balletic and beautiful curve, the furled sails rolled me over and over, giving me strange speed, volition unknown. And I unfolded myself like a lover rising victorious from the marriage bed. And I spread my arms, and I thrashed them into the ocean, and swam, looking for the surface, praying for it, gone a mile beyond mere breathlessness, ready to grow gills to survive this. And then it was there, the utterly simple sky, God's bare lights, in the serene harbours of the constellations, and I grabbed like a greedy child onto something, a shroud of something, a ruined and precious fragment, and there I floated, gripping on, half mad, for a minute without memory. Oh, May, for a minute all absence and presence, a creature blanked out and destroyed, a creature bizarrely renewed. By the grace of God, we were travelling in convoy that night, and by the grace of God, for some reason only known to its captain and its crouching sailors, the submarine melted off into the deeps, not that any of us saw. A corvette bristling with machine guns manoeuvred up near me. I heard the confident voices with wild gratitude. Arms reached down into the darkness for me, pulled me from the chaos, and I slumped, suddenly lumpish and exhausted, at the boots of my rescuers, falling down to lie with other survivors, some with dark blooded wounds, a few entirely naked, the clothes sucked off them. I lay there, ticking with life, triumphant, terrified. I noticed myself checking my inside pocket for the roll back, as if watching someone else, as if I were two people, and I laughed at my other self for his foolishness. We steamed into Accra the following morning. Roses are shining in Picardy, in the hush of the silver dew. Roses are blooming in Picardy, but there's never a rose like you. And the roses will die in the heart